I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for your patience today. There's been patience exercised by many of the advocates for years. This effort started over 10 years ago in the California State Assembly. I'm Senator Bill Monning. I'm honored to be one of the joint authors on the Senate side. I want to introduce the primary author, my co-author, joint author Lois Wolk, and our primary Assembly author, Assemblymember Susan Eggman.
I want to thank everybody for being here today and the interest this bill has generated. And when we as electeds get up here and talk about whose bill this is, I want to say that this bill is not anything that we own. This bill is for Californians who have been waiting for a compassionate choice. That's whose bill this is. And so we are glad to be able to do our part to get it this far. But let there be no mistake that this bill belongs to Californians who are suffering from terminal illnesses and would like another choice besides what is currently available to them. Because that is justice, that is kindness, that is compassion. Thank you.
With us, I'm Lois Wolk. With us are some wonderful people who have shown extraordinary courage in the face of some terrible personal tragedy to advocate for the rest of California so that others will not have to go through what like Brittany Menard and others have gone through. This is entirely about compassion and about caring, and that's what we need to be about in California. So, and Kevin, I'd like to, I don't need to introduce, but I'd like to welcome our pro tem, Kevin DeLeon. He and the speaker, Atkins, were extraordinarily helpful all the way along, actually from the very, very beginning. And I'd like to introduce our fine pro tem, Kevin DeLeon.
This is a profoundly personal and highly sensitive issue that touches nearly every Californian. I am very proud that this bill received a clear-eyed, open-hearted debate at every step of the legislative process. It is now a carefully crafted measure that safeguards against abuses and provides freedom to those who face an end-of-life choice that can only be their own. Thanks to the hard work and the tireless leadership of Senators Bill Monning, the Majority Leader for the California State Senate, Senator Lois Wolk, and Assemblywoman Susan Eggman Talamantes, this legislation has been handled with great thought and great care. I want to give a very special recognition also to my partner, Speaker Toni Atkins. Her leadership was fantastic during the course of this process. I want to say to Majority Leader Bill Monning, to Senator Lois Wolk, and I remember the day last year in December, right in my office when you broached the subject with me for the very first time. And we talked about the hurdles, and we talked about the obstacles, and we talked about all the landmines that would be present, and how complex and how difficult and how emotional this would be. But I want to thank both of you. And I want to thank Susan Eggman Talamantes. I am very, very, very proud of you. I also want to give much respect to the courage of the families who fought so valiantly for this choice. And California will now have the dignity. Californians will now have the dignity to make their own choice. I want to again thank everybody, and especially to the authors of this measure from the Senate and from the Assembly. Thank you.
I just wanted to invite a couple of the champions who have been with us throughout. We're joined today by Christy O'Donnell and Elizabeth Wellner. They've both testified in hearings. They're both facing very tough diagnoses as they join us. and knowing in their hearts that they, because of time, may not be the beneficiaries of this law, but they have helped to obtain it for other Californians. And it's been that selflessness that has seen them mobilize time and time again to come to Sacramento, to make themselves available when they're at a point where time with family is the most valuable time spent, and they've prioritized time here. Would you like to say something? We don't really have a PA system, but if you just, you want to get? Here. Here, just hold on to this too.
I want you all to know that this law, with these people standing around me, has changed my life, and it has changed possibly my death. Not just for me, but for my 21-year-old daughter, Bailey. More importantly, it has changed the lives of all of the terminally ill patients with me today and to come. It is priceless. It is a long time in coming and overdue. I could not be more proud of these people standing next to me today than I am for the tireless hours that they spent to give people like me, like other terminally ill in California, peace. Peace that we have begged for, that we deserve. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Elizabeth, would you like to?
Yeah, I just want to make sure her first is
And Elizabeth Wellner from Sacramento.
Everybody's trying to clean me up. Good luck. So, I'm Elizabeth Wellner from Sacramento, and I have stage 4 colon cancer, and I am so grateful, not for myself as much, but the fact that my son will not have to experience my agonizing death and that be the last thing that he sees. I am so grateful to all of the authors, all of the champions, all of the people who have come before me and helped. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Thank you.
And Debbie Ziegler, the mother of Brittany Maynard.
I just want to say that less than a year ago, my beautiful daughter spoke up for the terminally ill. She looked into a camera with clear, wide eyes, and she said, "I'm dying, and I'm going to take some control in this." And she said, "Mama, it's not fair that we have to move to do this." My daughter's choice in dying the way she died were her gift to the world. And it was done with love, not just for her family, but with love for mankind. She wanted to live. She loved this world. She was bigger than life. I think I'm just so happy for this day. Bless you, Brittany. Thank you.
Dan Diaz, husband of Brittany Maynard.
I'd like to say thank you to the legislators for their leadership that they showed, both on the Senate side and the Assembly. My own Assembly member, Baker, a Republican, for voting in favor of this and making it a bipartisan issue. Having the desire to have a gentle death is not unique to one side of the aisle or the other. It is something that all Californians should have. So with that, I brought along one of my favorite photographs of Brittany, because I think the expression the expression on her face relates how she would be feeling now today of pride and happiness that this bill now can move forward, get to the governor's desk, and hopefully become law so that terminally ill Californians can stay here in California and have a gentle dying process. So thank you.
And I'd like to invite Dr. Robert Olvera, whose daughter Emily Rose passed from terminal illness. Dr. Olvera, who's been a champion and spent a lot of time up here.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy. This is not a suicidal girl. This girl was not killed. She died suffering 4 months while I watched my daughter die. I'm a physician. This is only going to help many, many people from suffering. As a physician from Harvard, I know better, and I know that what was said is what some people believe, but Emily believed when she was dying that she said nobody should have to die this way. Emily had a stroke after 17 years of cancer, was blind the last 4 months, bedridden. She was fed, she had to be carried, and she was 85 pounds. I want to thank the legislators, and I want to tell the doctors that don't be afraid to help your patient. The Hippocrates Oath says we should help. This is helping. This girl needed help, and it's too late now. But it's not too late for others. And I want to thank the legislators. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Olvera. Quisiera hacer una declaración en español muy brevemente. Quisiera decir gracias a todos por su presencia este día y a decir que esta propuesta que pasó hace 10 minutos allá es una propuesta histórica y que va a cambiar los derechos de personas con enfermedades terminales en una manera donde existe ahora la opción de una avenida de compasión por los individuales con enfermedades terminales y también por sus familias a tener la oportunidad a platicar de todas las opciones, pero también a tener una nueva opción, una opción de compasión y dignidad. Gracias. Quisiera... Tony, please. Tony Broadus, who's been the lead champion organizer for Compassion and Choices. What we've done in the legislature has only been made possible because of what Compassion and Choices has organized throughout the state, throughout the nation. And they haven't created this movement because the human sentiment has been there. They've just organized the avenues of opportunity for people to have their voices heard. We thank you, Tony, and Compassion and Choices.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. It's a very exciting day, and a day we did not know would happen so soon. About 1.5 years ago, Compassion and Choices launched a 5-year campaign to bring medical aid and dying in California, medical aid and dying to California. It appears we were a little pessimistic, but what we didn't know is when we were launching the campaign to start educating folks in California, a young woman from California had just moved to Oregon. And I know you all know Brittany Menard's story because her voice was heard around the world by millions of people. And so don't ever let anyone tell you that one person cannot make a difference, because clearly Brittany's voice inspired so many people to stand up and tell their own stories, including many of the folks standing here with us today. It inspired legislators who had been working on this bill that now was the time and we should move it forward. It has taken all of us. The reality is the vast majority of Californians want these options at the end of life. And we could not be happier today that the legislature has overwhelmingly passed this legislation, the End of Life Option Act. Our hope, our fervent hope, is that Governor Jerry Brown will sign this bill and bring relief to hundreds of dying Californians. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Also, I'd like to introduce George Amy, a former Oregon legislator who's devoted his life to the implementation of the Oregon Aid in Dying law. He's been a tremendous resource to us and affirmed from personal experience the life-affirming benefits of this option for a select group of individuals who choose to pursue this option when facing terminal illness. Mr. Amy.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the legislators here who have taken the courage and bravery of passing this legislation today. It reminds me, 1997, I was standing in the hall when the citizens of the state of Oregon affirmed our law for the second time by a 60 to 40% vote. I was also honored and privileged to head up an organization for 12 years, being at the bedside of more than 4 dozen people who chose to use Oregon's Death with Dignity law. And I stand here and tell you that the opposition are misinformed. Oregonians are very proud people, and they were not coerced. They were dignified, and over 95% of the people who used the law in Oregon were enrolled in hospice. It is our goal to get people into hospice and palliative care and not to push the issue of death with dignity. So I'm just proud to have been a part of it, and the honor and privilege of being at the bedside of those who chose to use our law will now be bestowed upon many here in the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Members, now we're open to a few questions. If you'd identify your organization and direct your question, if you would.
Yeah, I'm Tim Burns with Ventura County. So I have a question for Mr. Diaz, and that is my understanding that your wife spoke by telephone with Governor Brown last year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you tell us the circumstances of that call and how she may have characterized the conversation?
Sure. Well, I'll keep these comments brief out of respect for that conversation, the governor's staff. Brittany had a conversation with Governor Brown 3 days before she died. It was a good conversation, a productive conversation. And my wife was certainly a determined individual and you know, asked the governor. At that time, there was no legislation, you know, even in the works, so of course there was really nothing for him to comment on. However, I'd like to think that hopefully, as he deliberates this very tough and very personal piece of legislation, that he'll remember that conversation with Brittany, and also listen to the overwhelming majority of Californians who are in favor, and then stories like Christy O'Donnell's, and keep those in mind as he forms an opinion and hopefully does sign this bill.
Other questions? Well, others can comment. I think without a doubt, if anyone was on the assembly floor 2 days ago, it feels like about a month ago now, but there wasn't a dry eye on the floor there, and that included opponents who felt the power of the emotion caught up in this. There's nothing potentially more emotional than life and death. We live in a society that lives in denial much of the time. We're not trained how to talk about death in families or in our medical system. This bill helps we think, advance not just an option for the end-of-life option, but it will help to promote broader conversation among families, between families and their physicians.
In our efforts to talk to our colleagues about such a bill, the discussions were extremely personal because it's almost impossible to find someone who hasn't had a very personal experience either with dying, with either a close family member or a close friend. And people want to share those stories, and legislators are no different. So there was a great deal of personal and emotional sharing that went on. So even if a person didn't believe that this bill was the answer, they knew that end-of-life issues were important, that were becoming increasingly important with the advent and the advances of medical technology. And with the changing demographics of our state, we're getting older. So more of us and our families are experiencing that. It's very personal.
I will also say, yes, I think this has been an incredibly emotional topic for people, as death is. And death is one of those things that touches everybody. We are a death-denying culture. People don't want to talk about it, thinking it won't happen to them. So our hope in being able to forward this legislation to provide people who want it options when they face the end of their life will be able to further everybody to have these difficult conversations with their families. We know the rates of hospice use, palliative care use in Oregon has gone up. And I like to think that's because people are having more conversations about it. And I can only hope that happens here in California as well.
Maybe one more question, then. I know many of the advocates and supporters would be glad to answer questions, but let's take one more formal question and then we'll move into more informal Q&A. Final question? Going once, going twice? Hearing none, please respect those that are with us here today and be respectful if they need to disengage from this process as well. It's been a long day. We thought we were going to start this morning, and here we are, but with a tremendous affirming vote in both houses. And I just want to thank the media for its coverage of this issue and for its sensitivity to moving the compass from, we think, a misnomer of physician-assisted suicide to the more appropriate discussion of aid in dying, medical aid in dying, which is the appropriate classification in medicine. So with that, we thank you for being here, and we look forward to your respectful engagement in encouraging Governor Brown to sign this into law. Thank you.
Thank you.